Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are getting back to our roots in DCW. We're talking Nephilim and giants, kind of the same thing, and principalities on this MLK episode of Mount Hermeneutics. So go ahead and keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the Divine Council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts, but you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
Guys, as the whitest person here, I apologize for the liability that I am. Like Matt, Dre, you're half black. Matt, you're a quarter Asian. If you had like another, non-white guy here, you'd probably be like bulletproof. You'd be uncancelable.
We don't have to qualify my blackness. I'm black, Brian. This is great content. I know. This is wonderful.
Matt will edit this out.
Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're talking Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Audible, wherever you get your podcasts, that's where we are. So you have no excuse not to hear our podcast. And if you're watching the video version, it's YouTube. So since you're on YouTube, go ahead and click that little subscribe button, and then the like, and then the notification, and leave a comment. Share the show with everybody you've ever met in your entire life, and you and I'll be cool.
And meet new people so you can introduce them.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And if it's your first time with us, I'm Andre. That's Brian. That's Matt. Fellas, what's happening?
Howdy.
I feel like there's some kind of I have a dream joke. I will probably make it bad, and then I'll have to edit it. So I'm just not going to say it.
I don't joke about MLK.
I am going to probably not say much.
I got very pensive when you started to decide what you were going to say just now. One might even say verklempt.
I was getting excited, and then you just kind of let me down.
What's kind of funny is that my company that I work for is they give holiday pay, right? Not for this one.
Racist.
Are they racist? And I was thinking that's because he doesn't rate, and everyone in the room like turns and looks at me. I'm like, what? Black people don't matter, do they? And then it became a joke when I wasn't kidding. But so it's and then they're trying to take that day away. I'm like,
who's they?
Trump and his people, Trump and his folks, orange mad bad.
They're trying to take away MLK Day.
Don't start with that day. You might want to start the day in June.
But he just signed. He just came out and said that he's going to create an executive order to protect the Army-Navy football game. I guess you got to have priorities.
I guess you do. There's a lot of black people playing those.
I'm trying to figure out how the Air Force is catching all these strays.
Right.
Air Force Academy is like they're the meme of the Indian guy.
We play football.
What's going on, guys? What's new?
I always feel like I have something, but I don't.
It slips away at the last minute.
I have a rich internal life, but it doesn't doesn't really translate well to relating stories.
This week I'll be working some music festival where they introduce new equipment and stuff. A big convention music, but NAMM. Right. I will be.
It's a NAMM. Really big deal in the guitar world.
So I'll be at NAMM.
That's cool.
I'll be escorting artists. I have an idea of who they might be, but I'm not going to say it here. But
right,
yeah, some people who might be a big deal.
Well, you could say it here because it'll be after the fact.
Do it.
No, it won't.
Do it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
No, it won't. Unless you're not going to do it on Wednesday.
What's the worst that'll happen if somebody hears it on here?
Being that he provides security.
Do
you even OPSEC, bro?
Are the bad guys listening to our show for intel?
Maybe they have it
I don't.
set for just certain names to pop up, right? Ooh,
I think you get away with it.
I think Nephilim. I'm guarding a dude named Nephilim. So
Good segue.
Nephilim,
Good segue
Nephilim.
into the show.
We ready for a little rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm always ready.
Rapid
Lightning round.
fire. All right, here we go. Where are the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible?
Genesis 6 and lots of other places.
I was going to say all over
Yep.
the Old Testament.
Were the Nephilim giants?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who were the sons of God in Genesis 6?
Divine beings.
The Watchers, more specifically.
What we would call angels, but we would be incorrect. Well,
Does the Bible
We'd be taxonomically incorrect. Yeah.
That's right.
We'd be
Does the
inaccurate.
Bible explicitly say that angels had sex with humans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Depends on which
Explicitly.
translation.
Okay.
Took of them as wives is explicit for
And had kids. I mean,
had sexual relations with.
Are Nephilim mentioned after the flood?
Yep.
yes.
Are Nephilim the same as Anakim, Rephaim, and giants like, our homeboy Goliath?
Yes.
Those are types of Nephilim. So yes.
Did Nephilim survive the flood?
Yes.
Nope.
What role do Nephilim play in the flood narrative?
They're
They
one of the
died. They
primary
all died.
causational drivers.
That too.
Are Nephilim connected to demons today?
Yes.
It's a good question.
Why are Nephilim so popular in modern teaching?
I don't know. It's kind of dorky.
Whoa.
I think it's the opposite. I think it's one of the more kind of like high points that you can really focus on in the Old Testament of the Bible.
What is the safest biblical takeaway?
The safest
The
biblical takeaway.
safest.
Don't have sex with angels.
I think it's so multifaceted that it's hard to nail that down. Like it encompasses false worship. It's an essay question.
I was curious there's multifaceted, but I was curious if you had a quick take on which one's the
Oh, like
priority.
one thing that's just
I think it's an early form of celebrity culture, but
Okay.
a whole lot is contained in that. So
Do Nephilim even matter for Christian doctrine?
I think so.
they're downstream of what matters for Christian doctrine.
And that'll do it for a lightning round.
Those are good questions. Again,
Yeah, those are pretty good.
there might be more applause.
I want to revise my last answer.
Okay.
Yes.
You know what? We're growing. We're growing, Matt. We're growing. Maybe we should play back Brian's tape more often to him.
Right?
So
That's not necessary.
all right, that was the end of lightning round, but I have one more bonus question, and this is going to seem super duper relevant to everybody watching, especially if you're from the Pacific Northwest. Is Bigfoot a Nephilim?
I think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
Is that because you don't think Bigfoot's real?
I think Bigfoot's real.
But he's not a Nephilim.
I know Bigfoot is real.
I was not expecting that.
I'm going to say Bigfoot is not real, but if he were, he would also not be a Nephilim.
Why are you so close-minded about Bigfoot?
I'm not close-minded. I'm just curious.
I am.
Oh,
no, saying I am. Yeah.
I think that Bigfoot's an interdimensional being, and that's why you can't see him. That's why the picture's always fuzzy, which makes him a demon or a daimon or
A daemon.
Daemon.
No, he's not real.
He's totally real.
He'd be the longest living single. I mean, we had to see multiple big feet, not just one big foot.
Well, I don't think anybody thinks there's just one
There's like a
Bigfoot
tribe of
running
Bigfoot.
around. They think like they mean like is that species real? I don't think anybody's
John Lithgow found one and brought it home to his family.
What was that movie called?
Harry and the
Harry,
Hendersons.
yeah, Harry and the Hendersons. Yeah,
Nice 80s throwback
I
there.
forgot about that movie for good reason.
There was a point where I watched it probably twice a week on VHS
Mm,
because my brother's younger than me, so we watched, silly stuff.
hmm
I
I'm
remember
sure my
watching
I'm sure
it
my
when
brother's watching the show like, you want to shut the fuck up, man?
I remember watching it as a kid and being pleasantly surprised because anyway,
I
I
I
don't have
remember I remember
more to
my
say about it.
dad
We're not here to talk about Bigfoot.
So yeah,
sort of enjoyed it and was like, yeah, you kids can watch this, whatever. When you're a dad, movies you can handle the kids
Hmm.
watch.
I can tolerate this,
Yeah,
but
right,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All right.
yeah.
All right.
So
So, what were our
Nephilim.
questions, Dre? What we need to dig
So,
into?
hey, let's dig into this first. This is the first one we're gonna do. Who were the sons of God in Genesis 6? I think this is what sets it all off, why Nephilim exists in the first place. And then if whatever you believe about who the sons of God are, is kind of where your angle takes on what a Nephilim actually
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
I think it's
So, so,
important to.
so, yeah, I was going to say some stuff about that, and then I'll let Brian kind of dig in a little bit more. So, there's really two schools of thought.
Well, three
Okay. All right.
really,
Okay.
but
But so, in this space that we refer to as the divine council worldview, which was coined by the late Dr. Michael Heiser, um, the prevailing thought is that the sons of God are angelic beings. Brian mentioned during lightning round, not angels. They were called watchers according to the book of Enoch,
and the
which
book of Daniel. But
oh,
yes,
that's right. Yeah, yeah, that's right. It is in Daniel, which implies that there were multiple types of divine beings, of divine Elohim, that had different roles. Michael Heiser goes out of his way to explain that the term angel relates to basically a job description or a function.
yeah, angel
Um,
just means messenger. It's
right,
not a species designation or an
right.
ontology. But
And there were obviously other types of divine beings. There were cherubim and seraphim and a few others, if I'm not mistaken. We don't need to turn this into an angelology conversation, but simply put, when we, from the divine council worldview, read the word sons of God, we interpret that as Elohim. Uh, and then Brian, you want to talk about the Sethite view and kind of the wrong opinions and the wrong
yeah,
interpretations?
yeah. So there's
Re- There's also real quick. I want to bring up this view
Sure.
where there's the royal tyrant view,
yeah,
where
that's
basically
the
it's ancient kings that are
Right.
claiming divine
Yeah,
status
that's
who
the
took women
third.
by
That's the third one. That yeah.
they took them by force. But the Sethite view is way more important. I'll let Brian explain that one.
yeah. So it is the point in favor of it. Well, the view is that sons of God refers to the line of Seth. Daughters of men refers to the line of Cain, and that the implication is that this was like a forbidden intermingling of these two lines. And this is the strongest argument for that is that in Genesis 4 you have the lineage of Cain, then you have the lineage of Seth, and then they just kind of assume Genesis 6 follows after that. But the text simply doesn't say that. The line of humans are just not referred to as sons of God in the Old Testament, except not in anything resembling that general a context. Like there's nothing within the text to go from to interpret the genealogy of Seth to be sons of God. That's just I think it's and then of course there's the kings claiming divine status and seizing women as their concubines, and this is part of the corruption of the earth. But it simply doesn't jive with other uses of the term sons of God. Like you find it in Job pretty frequently, which is like a major divine council setting. um Job 1:6, the sons of God came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan also came among them. um and so and this is this is typical divine council stuff.
And that would be really weird if that was a Sethite interpretation, right? So the
Yeah.
descendants of Seth and Satan sat down to talk to God. They were like, "Hey, we need to talk to you." It's like, what are you guys doing here? And why is
How did
Satan
you
with
get?
you?
How did you get here? You know, it makes me like I get why a secular historian or scholar would think that. Why do why do mainstream Christians today think that? Like I understand like the supernatural element, plenty of just Bible scholars aren't going to believe it unless these guys are just
Well,
stupid, right?
I I would think secular Bibles, like non-believing Bible scholars, would be more inclined to believe supernatural elements of the Bible because it doesn't strain their belief system to write it off. They're writing out all off as fiction anyway.
Okay, so
Um,
it just reinforces their fiction if
right,
they take it down that road. Okay.
right. But I think his name is Michael Johnson of Inspiring Philosophy. He has a couple videos addressing this where he lays out his. I think he subscribes to the kings with divine affording divine status of themselves theory to it, but he lays out his reasons for. I don't remember what they are. I've never heard anything persuasive about it. I think it's just a matter of tradition, really. um the early church fathers were, it seems like as time went on and they got more and more distant from the Jewish roots of Christianity, they more and more kind of adopted the Sethite view. Um, but of course, they weren't unanimous about anything. But I mean, I think it's really just largely tradition and an idea that they've got it ingrained in them that the Bible teaches monotheism. So to have these other beings who are divine beings who are presiding in this council before God, that's to them that sounds like polytheism. It's
Which
really not.
which is ironic, considering that the early church fathers were essentially Catholic or proto-Catholic, and the Catholics have no problem with the concept of saints becoming angels, and all of this, this host of heavens that you're praying to, and all of that. Like, so it's weird that I agree with you that it feels like, and I think it probably had to do with mankind becoming more advanced scientifically, and it feels like as we've gone down the path of science, we tend to become much more self-assured and
Well,
kind of self-absorbed from a concept of we're doing all of this, whereas the more primitive humans seem to have no problem with the idea of supernatural entities that could affect the world.
Yeah, and Dr. Heiser attributed it to an anti-supernatural bias among Christians, and I think he's gotten a bad rap for that because Christians who will accept readily enough the virgin birth and the resurrection and the existence of angels, but for some reason they won't accept this. But I think there's something to that. I think I think there is a level of embarrassment among Christians who are desperate to make Christianity appear scientifically respectable, that we're talking about divine beings siring half divine, half human offspring, and that being a major feature of the ancient world. So it's a lot more comfortable to kind of
not if they're aliens.
yeah. So
This brings me to another question then. So we have these supernatural divine beings in the Bible. You both said that the Bible explicitly says that these angels had sex with humans.
Explicitly.
Explicitly. So how do we, like, it doesn't like imply that they had sex. It says, hey, no, these dudes got
No,
down.
it's
They
pretty.
listen to Marvin Gaye and they got down.
well, the actual verses, in those days men began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. And the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and took of them as wives any of whom they chose. And the Hebrew is basically just it's very uncomplicated, but took as wives is basically saying they took them for sex. It doesn't mean they carried them to Vegas and had Elvis marry them and with a ceremony. It meant they had sex with them, and then the Lord God said, my spirit will not strive with man forever, for his days are mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had offspring by them. These were the heroes of old, the men of renown. So if they had offspring by them, I don't know of another way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, so
So
I'll just put a finer tip on it, right? I said during lightning round when I answered the question, it simply depends on the translation you're reading. So I'll quickly read. I just have these two. So the New English translation, which by the way, it's probably why I always default to this translation when I start reading. It tends to be a lot more DCW friendly. But not always. It actually intermingles some Sethite interpretations from time to time. But to put the fine point on this, so Genesis 6:4, and this is how it reads: The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after this, when the sons of God would sleep with the daughters of humankind who gave birth to their children. So that's the New English translation. Then the New Living Translation, last one I'll read. In those days and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. So, I mean, it doesn't get more explicit than that, and
That's
keep
pretty
it
explicit.
not to keep it in a divine reading kind of
In
well,
material.
in ancient times, that's probably some NC-17 stuff right there.
Right.
and
So,
just to play devil's advocate, though, those are translations. So if somebody was of a mind that they're that it's not, I don't know of anyone who denies the sexual aspect of it, though.
Right. It's more
So
the translation for the
so, so
sons
you
of
know
yeah,
God.
what dawns on me? This is me thinking in real time. So, how often, especially you, Brian, have you said that, we don't become disembodied spirits when we go to heaven, right? You actually have a body.
yeah.
So,
Well, you don't go to heaven.
oh, fair, but these beings are from heaven, right? They're
Yeah.
sons of God, or they're from whatever realm that
Well,
is, and clearly they have a body. And if all these creatures are kind of made in the image of God, then they're sort of interchangeable a bit, right? So you would think these are not disembodied spirits. Angels aren't disembodied spirits. They're actually like dudes.
So
well,
that's an interesting point. One clarification I'll make is I've never seen language, biblical language, that implies that the Elohim were made in the image of God.
Sure.
Just not as a nit, right? But as a
Right.
clarifying point, I think that's always been what separates us from the Elohim is that
But
we
I
were
well,
made in God's
I
image.
think that if you can mate, then
ex-
you're at least close.
well, except in Genesis 1 when he says, "Let us make man in our image, in the image of God he made them, male and female he
Oh,
created them."
snap.
Now I don't.
Interesting. I never thought of
Doc,
that, Brian. That's a fair
Doctor
point.
Doctor Heiser says that he was addressing that to the Beni Elohim,
Hmm.
um,
In the divine council.
right? Others take that to be an internal discussion within the Trinity.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know that there's nothing in the text that I see that settles that either way.
Fair.
Um, so I don't have an opinion.
I
But
my opinion would simply say that there's never a point in the text where the Trinity have an internal dialogue that's explicitly called out.
um,
Jesus speaks to the Father through prayer, but there's never like a three-way conference call where the three of them jump in Zoom and like have a conversation.
well, God speaks back to Jesus in a couple
Yeah,
of
yeah,
places.
but that was a two-way conversation, not a party call.
Yeah, I don't find that persuasive. Like I don't think that um, uh, it. I don't.
but I guess my point was like a lot of people when they think of the sons of God or angels, that it'd be impossible to have sex with women
I get no,
because
I get you. I think
they're
you're
not
making a
made
point
of the same material.
that somehow they
And
had a divine body that
right.
if they came down or here, however they transport themselves, that they showed up in a body of sorts. They're not ethereal. They're physical.
Well, I think they manifest as physical when they come into our plane, but they are. I mean, the scripture is plain that they are spirits. And Hebrews. Hold on. This is great content. Watching me search for stuff, but Hebrews 2, verse 5, it is not to angels that he has subjected the world to come, about which we were speaking, but there is a place where someone has said, what is mankind that you are mindful of him? Um, Sorry, I was not prepared for this question, but I know it's definitely in here. Um, you can just edit this out later.
If I can find it.
Um, I already read that part, and then there's a part where he quotes I think the Psalms where they're described as winds and flames of fire, like basically intangible things. Um,
That could be
but
literary. That could be, you know, trying to just simply remind people that they're Elohim and that they're divine, right?
I mean,
um,
do we have an aspect of ourselves that are actually spirits?
well, it's describing them it's describing and I sorry, I can't find it readily. Hold on.
Sorry. So they manifest themselves. So Brian, there's an extra layer there. There's a layer of and maybe that's why Enoch draws it out because basically when they come down, they make the deal like, hey, we're stuck here if we do this. Like this is it. We can't go back. Are we
Um,
all in? I mean, they are fine. So let's
Look at
that's so
that
crazy.
hair.
That's so crazy to me. That's so wild. Like I'm gonna give up being an angel, basically,
Okay, one
to come do.
Hebrews 1:6. And again, when God brings his firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. And speaking of the angels, he says he makes his angels spirits or winds and his servants flames of fire. But about the Son, your throne, O God, will last forever and ever. So yeah, I think my understanding of from based on that, based on other passages, based on Genesis, I think 18, when the three men come to Abraham. One of them is Yahweh, the other two are men. I don't take that they're not physical by default, but they can assume a physical form. Um, and that seems to be the gist
Yeah, but if
through
they
the
can
rest of
assume a
scripture.
physical form, and it feels like that gets us into a whole nother rabbit hole because if they can assume a physical form, can they drop the physical form whenever they want to?
Yeah,
Or
why
is
not?
that just when they transfer
Well, there's no way they
realms
can because of what
or
happens in Daniel.
dimensions, right? Like how
What happens in Daniel?
When the angel appears to Daniel and says he's been detained by another prince. Like if he's an
Well,
angel, he could have just vanished and teleported or whatever they do. He could have angeled out of there.
I that's assuming that he was physically detained. Like we don't know. I can't begin to guess how angels fight each other. Like I don't.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
I,
it's
I obviously we're kind of off in a rabbit hole of what ifs, right? Like it's a little shoulder
but
shruggy, but
so but what are you getting at, Dre, by bringing that up? What's the
I think that is why they'll say, I mean, beyond the polytheistic things, they're like angels can't have sex with women, so obviously it's the sons of Seth. Right? Like it can't be an
yeah
angel because angels don't, they can't do that. Do they even have the parts to do that? Like I think that that's a stretch for the modern Christian reader
yeah
or even
yeah, I mean, I
before
guess
us,
the
the
only
medieval.
I think a simple way to shut that conversation down or to counter it rather, right, is to talk about what was happening in Sodom, right? The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where the angels came to visit and all of a sudden all the village people wanted to rape the angels,
because
right?
they're so hot.
But if the angels were unrapeable, then they could have just been like, good luck, like knock it off. But instead, you know, Lot offered his daughter, which is still a really strange story, but one of the weirdest, like problematic scenarios I can
Right.
think of in the Bible, but that's neither here nor
So
there.
so I guess that leads us to, were Nephilim actually giants?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they were, or they were they just,
Well, so
was
when
it
you
just
say actually, what does a giant mean? Right? Like I think
like
that's
how big, like,
Well, so
or is it
when
just
they
descriptive language, exaggeration, or
I
just
think it's both.
fear-based?
well,
um
it's not descriptive. The description comes from the fact that Nephilim were called gigantes. Like we get when you say giant, that the in Greek, the word that was translated that became giant didn't mean giant until it was applied to the Nephilim. Let me explain that.
Okay.
So
Please do.
in Greek mythology, you have the stories of the Titans, Uranos, the sky god, and Gaia, the earth goddess. Their kids are the Titans. Um, there's a story where Cronus wants to overthrow Uranos, and so Uranos goes in to be with his wife Gaia, and Cronus takes an adamantine sickle and lops off his junk. Um, the blood from the wound penetrates the earth, and from that spring up gigantes, which means it's from the Greek gi, meaning Gaia, from the earth, gantes, meaning born of, like generated from.
Hmm.
So gigantes just means born of the earth. And because the gigantes are the siblings of the Titans, sometimes they're kind of conflated in Greek mythology. So Titan and Gigantes were interchangeable terms in some usages. But you look on like artistic renderings, like pottery depicting the Titans and the Gigantes, they're not of any greater stature than the gods or of mortals. Like they're just like human sized and shaped. Um, but because in like there's kind of a weird interplay of Hellenistic culture and Jewish culture where they kind of the reasons that we refer to the Watchers and the Sons of God as angels now instead of gods is because when the Septuagint was translated, they didn't want to call them gods and have the connotation be that these are the Olympian gods. These are beings to be worshipped. And so the same kind of like trickiness came into play with translating Nephilim. They used this term that was synonymous with the Titans to convey kind of this this semi-divine status. But because the Nephilim were known to be larger in stature, gigantes came to mean giant as we know it. But the
so
word
like
itself didn't mean
So
that.
they were, but they weren't. That's what you're saying?
right, so basically, like, what if the average man back then was 5'3" and this dude was like 6'5"?
Um,
That
oh,
would be
like our
huge, right? Like,
Yeah, so you're asking if they were giants in the sense of like fee fi fo fum,
yeah.
like
Well, not like 20 feet tall, just abnormally like they were RUSs, right? They
Even
they
though
they were they were
there's that king
HOUSs.
with his bed that was pretty big, right?
yeah, and that goes back to the sex question also. So King Og of Bashan, Bashan, of course, is the region where Mount Hermon was, which is where the Watchers descended. But when the Israelites defeated Og, king of Bashan, they just the in Deuteronomy it describes the dimensions of his iron bed, and they're like huge. Um, I forget the exact
It's like
dimensions,
15
but
feet.
It's like cubits big.
It was like 15 feet tall, or like
yeah,
the head to foot part was like 15 feet.
yeah. And it says, can this bed still not be seen Shechem or whatever. I don't think it was Shechem, but it was. Can it not be seen in this town that we all know? So it's basically it's being kept as a cultic object, like as a like this is a like a museum piece, if you will, but it was sort of it was kept as an artifact to this guy's reign because he was this historical fearsome king that they wanted to remember, but also it was probably an object of worship for the surviving Canaanites. Dr. Heiser has remarked that the bed is the same dimensions as the sacred bed of Marduk. Um, I haven't been able to find out where he got that from. Um, so I don't know if that's true, but
It's
the
always
fact
the erratic text. That's always where it comes from. It feels like every time Heiser has some revelation that went in the Bible, it was the Ugaritic text, however you
the,
pronounce that.
the Ugaritic text.
Ugaritic,
Ugaritic?
yeah, yeah. It's always the Ugaritic text.
Um, but whether it is the exact dimensions or not is kind of that would be helpful to confirm. But the fact that it was a cultic object uh, still kind of ties it to having some kind of sacred status. And it's known that there was a sacred bed of Marduk that would be, I don't remember if it was atop the ziggurat of Edamanaki or if it was in the temple alongside it, but it was used for ritual sex. Um, so the fact that every year at New Year they would kind of reenact the union of Marduk and Inanna, which is kind of the same pattern you see with Baal and Ashtoreth or Ishtar. It's a standard ancient Near East storm god, earth fertility goddess pattern. They believe that when it was raining, that was the storm god having intercourse with the earth goddess. And so if there was a drought, they would have this sort of sex based worship to get them in the mood. It was basically live
Oh,
porn
those
done as
ancients,
a
they're so simple. Sex,
but the
sex, sex.
but the
Well, they
fact
didn't
that
have the internet.
the fact that ancient Near Eastern religion revolves so much around sex this kind of refers back to the Mount Hermon incident of the sons of God going into the daughters of men. They're it's kind of based on that ancient pattern that they're trying to recreate. But
I feel like I read somewhere that Atlantis had the internet.
That's why it sank.
That it is. So the internet's gonna be the death of us. It's ChatGPT.
Don't get Brian started.
So that brings me to the Anakim, the Rephaim, and homeboys like Goliath. Are those Nephilim? Because the Bible doesn't really mention Nephilim again, and it mentions the Anakim and the Rephaim
Right.
as later tribal groups, and
um,
then it seems like the word giant is kind of a language and just may function as a theological intimidation and not necessarily biology.
it does mention Nephilim again in the Torah and during the conquest of Canaan. Number like when they went in to spy out the promised land, the 12 spies, and they
Right.
came back and they said, we saw Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim, the narrator says. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. So it just that one statement taken in isolation could be taken to mean them just exaggerating. They're freaking out because they're intimidated. But then the next line, like the writer interpolates the Nephilim, or they're talking about the Anakim, who are the descendants of the Nephilim.
I
So
I kind of feel like that the old Anglo-Saxons had the same idea when the Danes invaded. Like, what are we supposed to do with that axe-wielding berserker freak that's
Yeah.
coming at me right now?
Yeah. I forget the context biblically, but when we're talking about the Rephaim and the all the different descendant tribes, there's a couple of thoughts that come up. One is all of those times, and I know we did a show about genocide, right? About
Right.
religious genocide and whatnot. But all of the times that God was basically calling for wholesale destruction of lands, it was when there were Nephilim descendancy in those spaces. Like all of those wipe all these people out was because there were Rephaim there, or there were Nephilim there, or there were, some of the other versions of that.
Well, not some of them, yeah.
No, I'm not saying every time it was, but every time that there were some, that was a place that God targeted for annihilation.
Yeah, but a lot of times you like in the book of Numbers and in Joshua, they're talking about conquering the promised land. Like it'll mention these groups of Nephilim, like these descendants, and but it a lot of times it's well these the I think it's the Amalekites. Yeah, they were descended from the Nephilim, but they were wiped out by the Moabites. Like some of the groups are already there.
Yeah, somebody
They're
did
taken
somebody
care
did
of.
the light work already, so it
Yeah,
wasn't necessary. Yeah, but I was just pointing out that, some of that eradication was focused on
yeah.
this. And
Like
there was
odd.
also a mention of a giant that was in down in Egypt.
Yeah, I don't think he was described as being
Really,
particularly
that
tall.
was what I was getting at, is that I was reading another article, and they made the point that there was this one instance of this really big dude in Egypt, but they never called him a giant. They never called him a
Yeah,
Nephilim. He was just a really big dude. And so, to the question of, were they giants? They were giants in the sense that Brian was saying, not in the sense of just because you were 7 foot or taller, you were automatically a giant or a Nephilim. That there was more to it than that. And so
right.
this big dude in Egypt just won the genetic lottery, but he
Yeah,
came by it naturally, so to
yeah,
speak,
they
right?
they definitely made a distinction between someone who was just extraordinarily tall and someone who was a Nephilim. Like
Right.
those are,
I wonder if there were some physical features that made that
Like
clear.
having 6 fingers and 6 toes or something like
Right.
that.
Or yeah, or just having a different shaped head,
Right.
or I mean, I don't know, but there's something
Where you
that
could
they
see them
knew,
and you were just like,
right?
Nephilim. Yeah.
Or they had crazy eyes or something, like something that everyone back then would know so they wouldn't have to put it down.
I think there probably
Where
was. But
where us reading it today, like how if that's a big dude and that's a giant, like what the hell's the
or why
difference? Like
that
what are
dude's
we
not that big, but he's but
well, I
he's
think I
super
think they
dope.
would I think they would have known the regional history well enough to know like this people group is descended from, and also the fact that they're called Rephaim, like that means like that ref a Rapha is it's a there's a whole etymological range of connotations to it, but it basically means like someone who's dead. Um,
Yeah, but
so
why couldn't they just move and then all of a sudden, just blend in somewhere else and you don't know
well,
if they're a damn Nephilim or not.
like
Kind of like Bigfoot.
my point here in like the fact that they called them Rephaim, the connotation was that they were from a bygone age. They were like the living Nephilim were sort of kind of leftovers from this age that had already passed on, and so they thought of them as sort of
Oh, so they were just racist, what you're saying.
sure. I'll just leave it there. Yeah, close
So
close
so
enough.
so so speaking of that, are the Nephilim connected to demons today?
They are, yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean,
Um,
the scriptures say that?
the scripture does not say that, but
But you
when
know
they're
what
called,
does?
well, kind of does. It doesn't say
Ugaritic
that.
text.
It doesn't say that explicitly. The book of Enoch explicitly says that because Nephilim are hybrid beings, because they're half immortal spirit from their fathers, but also they're human, so they're bound to the earth. So when they die, their spirits stay alive, but they don't go to heaven where their fathers are from. So they're just kind of, they either go to the abyss, which they hate, or they wander the earth looking for someone to possess.
Or they
Um,
just chill in creaky houses and in
And play with
places
electricity.
or places in San Diego where
so
paranormal activity took place.
when they're called unclean spirits in the Gospels, it's not because they're dirty spirits. It's because they are unclean. Is the like if you read Leviticus and how it uses
Somebody
clean
tossed
versus
that demon a bar of soap. Goodness.
the way it uses clean versus unclean, it's like things that are mixed that don't belong together. That's unclean. So an unclean spirit is it's a hybrid between the Elohim and humans. And so
Does that mean Dre's unclean?
um
In the 70s they thought so for sure. I've been told. I've been told.
So
This is
to flesh that one out a little bit, the way how I've come to think about it is the reason that it could happen, that this mixed spirit concept could come to pass is because of human man's uh, unique status within creation as the image bearer of God, right? Um, because jumping forward to, because I know Brian will find a way to work it in if I don't. Um, when oh shoot, I forgot when Jesus is talking to, what is it, Zachariah?
Nicodemus.
Nicodemus. Thank you, Dre.
right.
Nicodemus, the famous Nicodemus exchange, right? Um, we should call it the Nicodemus parable. Um, but Christ says to Nicodemus essentially, because Nicodemus asks, will we be married in heaven? And he
No,
says,
well,
that's what he asks.
no, we don't know what Nicodemus was going to ask. That's a later, that's not actually in John's gospel. The question about the Sadducees came to Jesus with a question
Oh, that's right.
about
That's right. That's right. I was conflating two conversations. That's right. But the question
so
is, they were trying to trick Jesus and say, are we going to have spouses, or is our wives, are we going to have husbands and wives? And he says, no. And he says the angels don't either. Right. So there's an implication that the angels don't reproduce, that the angels don't have babies. Right. And there's other implications. I'm not trying to make this point theological. I'm trying to make just a very specific point that Jesus said very clearly the angels don't have husbands and wives and don't reproduce. And
well,
so the idea that the watchers reproduced with humans was was against the intentions of God's creation plan. Right? Like that last part of my sentence is beyond contestation. The angels having babies with humans was not part of God's plan, but
yeah,
something that
that's what Jude characterized as them being condemned for leaving their proper station.
right.
But everything
All I'm
else,
saying is my little piece of this, as I spent a lot of time thinking about this, is I think there's something to the idea that angels did this because they could. I don't believe that the angels can do it in heaven and simply don't out of self-control. I don't think they're capable of it. I don't think they're capable of creating life, but humans can
That's why they needed a human womb to do it.
because of the image bearer status that humans have, right? That was the point that I was making.
yeah, I think the Sadducees came to Jesus and they asked him at the resurrection. There's this woman who she married a man, the man died, so she married his brother. This is what's known as a Levirate marriage. If the you see this in Genesis with Judah's sons, the custom was if a man dies childless, his next of kin is to marry the widow, and then whatever children she has would be reckoned to him and carry on his name. He had seven brothers. Each one died in turn, and then she died.
That's a hell of a gotcha question.
So there's these seven, and the Sadducees, and they're asking specifically about the resurrection, not about going to heaven, but it's often interpreted to mean that. But The Sadducees rejected anything outside of the Torah. They didn't believe the prophets or the Psalms. Any of that was authoritative, and they rejected the resurrection. They thought that the laws of the Torah were eternal, though, and so they thought that by coming up with this impossible legal scenario, this disproved the resurrection. They basically tried to lawyer the resurrection away. And so they asked Jesus at the resurrection, whose wife will she be? And then Jesus said, rebuke them. You know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage, for they will be like the angels. It's worth pointing out that they asked him a legal question, and what he gave was a legal answer. It wasn't a discussion about biology. And
No, I get it.
yeah, so like it's not that we don't reproduce at the resurrection, it's that we're if you take this in the context of the Sermon on the Mount, where he, like, yet he taught, yet let your yes be yes, your no be no, anything beyond this comes from the evil one. If you have to take an oath, that implies that you are by default a liar. Righteous, redeemed people don't need oaths to keep them honest. We don't need laws to keep us from doing evil. We by nature don't want to do evil. Marriage as a legal institution presupposes that by nature we're going to be unfaithful. And so we create this contract and with all of our friends and family as witnesses to hold us to it, to be faithful to that one person. If we're perfected in our nature, we don't need a contract or a law or an oath to ensure faithfulness to our partner. So that's what he's talking about in the marriage. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage, but they will be like the angels, who don't have laws. They already know and can do by nature what's right. So it's like that question doesn't actually have any bearing I'm sorry, that scenario doesn't actually have any bearing on whether or not angels or Beni Elohim can reproduce, because it's a legal question. So
I get it.
anyway,
No, I understand that there's a separation between the two, but I mean, again, we're in, relatively uncharted waters. So to say that the metaphysical doesn't follow the legal or vice versa, like who knows?
Why is it so popular in modern teaching today? Why are the Nephilim such a big deal? Like, if you like all our subjects, just the hashtag Nephilim gets the most like peaks, right? So why is that such a big deal?
I, I think it's a big deal because it's I think it was very much fringe. Uh, I don't know, just 20, 30 years ago. And I think with modern communication, uh, abilities to have non-mainstream conversations and ideas around topics that are a couple thousand years old, right? Um, it's easier to have those conversations. I remember when the movie Noah came out, right? And you had these meteorites hitting the ground, and then they turned into these big lighted up fiery things that essentially were Nephilim. People were like, "What the hell is that? That's not in the
well,
Bible."
no, those were watchers. Those
They're
weren't
right.
Nephilim.
Oh, I said Nephilim. I'm sorry. They were watchers. Yeah, they were Elohim. But I remember people going, "What the hell is that? That's not in the Bible." And I'm like, "Well, it kind of is. I mean, not literally, but it doesn't say it that way. But we don't know what they look like, and we don't know how they got here. I mean, that's as good as any other way they got here." Um, but it was interesting that people were having this. I remember specifically being at my stepbrother's house on like a Friday night. There was like a big gathering, and we're having drinks after having dinner, and there's like eight of us standing in the kitchen, as you do. And why do people stand in the kitchen at gatherings? But we were standing in the kitchen, and I had taken my family to see Noah, and others had seen it. We didn't all go watch it together, and it just came up. And somebody in the room was like, "That's not even in the Bible." And I'm like, "Kind of is." This is like,
Well,
when I was just starting to get into the DCW stuff. Um,
those aspects were specifically from the Book of Enoch, except
well,
it's kind of a like a a distorted version of
Yeah,
it.
and they Hollywooded it, and they kind of took
Yeah.
some liberties, and the stuff with Tubal-Cain trying to get on the boat and all that. I mean,
Yeah.
all of that was just for drama's sake. But the point is still, it was something, a different way to tell a story, right?
Yeah, and it's a side of the story that you don't usually get. Just as an aside, in the movie Noah, where they're walking around and these kind of fiery beings trapped in these boulders that are, this is from the Book of Enoch, where it says that the Watchers were imprisoned within the earth. Um, the idea is they're down there. There's like a big pit in the earth where they've got rocks thrown on them, and it's kind of like a subterranean dungeon. In the movie, he had them trapped in earth in a different sense, but they're walking around on the surface of the earth encased in rocks and stuff. So they're just, in the movie, they're describing this as their prison, which was evocative of, so it's a distorted version of what you find in the Book of Enoch. But just anyway, rabbit trail.
Yeah, but I like I said, it's a different way to talk about something. I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, the Bible feels stale. It feels boring, and this is certainly not boring content.
Yeah, it creates this sort of magical fantasy element to the Bible, um, which is fun, and which I think the same thing that makes it appealing to people, to some people, is what makes it embarrassing to others.
And they turn off from it
Yeah,
because they feel like it's too um uh synthetic or
or
made up.
it's too fantastical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think anytime you add mystery, ancient lore, and supernatural intrigue, like it becomes more of a comic book than
Yeah.
theology, right? So, and that's way more fun to just think about and even argue about and or even speculate, because when we're talking about a single verse in the Bible, right? That makes you like, what?
Well, especially when you take a step back and you get a little open-minded about the interpretations of the things that we just talked about tonight, and you say, okay, so these watchers, and we didn't get into a deeper DCW explanation, but if the watchers are indeed uh, divine creatures from heaven, you know, and the sons of God means what the sons of God means, then when you read, Brian, keep me, is it Leviticus or Deuteronomy, when God then turns over the kingdom, the world, he numbers
Um,
it to match the sons of God.
yeah, that's in Deuteronomy 32,
Thank
7
you.
through 9, where
Yeah. So
he
God basically, after the Tower of Babel, he says, I'm going to take Israel, take them back, but the rest of this world is now, I'm giving it over to the Watchers. And I've always kind of read that to mean there's an assumption that the Watchers were then going to be dutiful stewards of the land and manage it the way God wanted them to, and they didn't. And then other things continued to happen, right? Well, if you take that and then you kind of lay that against, you know, non-Christian mythologies, you start going, wait, so we're like those watchers, these things that we've read about and heard about. And then you go, okay, go back to Genesis 6 and the stories of Hercules and uh, Achilles and these Greek demigods. Were they Nephilim? So then you're like, was Hercules biblical? Not good,
yeah,
not in a good way, right?
and
Like,
I and I think that, like, I think this gets us to the real meat of this topic of, like, why does this matter to us as
mhm.
Christians? Why is this important information to have? And I think and I've been thinking about this a lot, really.
As you should.
And it kind of ties back to, like, what I said about this particular version of Gnosticism, which is by no means all of Gnosticism, but but still a good sample of Gnosticism. But it's basically about moral framing. The Gnostic, this particular version of Gnosticism has the serpent as the hero. He's like this Prometheus figure who liberates mankind from the clutches of the evil demiurge, of the creator god. And you have kind of the
Of
same,
the creator God,
um,
if you want to get Gnostic with it.
you have this,
Dre used air quotes for the listeners on the podcast.
yeah. Um, well, in Gnosticism, it teaches that flesh and matter are intrinsically evil, and that salvation consists of being freed of them. And so, a creator who traps everybody in physical bodies, it was an act of evil within this moral framing, which makes the serpent the liberator. But kind of, you take the same idea of flipped moral framing, read Psalm 82, which is God condemning the divine council, saying you are all gods, you are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere mortals for your corruption. um if you read the Norse legend of Ragnarok, which is the twilight of the gods, the gods are going to have this epic battle at the end of time, where they're all wiped out, and but they're fighting anyway because they're brave and heroic. It kind of seems like Psalm 82, but with a flipped moral framing, where the corrupt gods of the divine council, they're doomed, but they're going to be heroes about it. You look at the story of in the book of Enoch, of the Watchers who descended on Mount Hermon and corrupted mankind, being condemned to the abyss until Judgment Day. This kind of seems like a an echo of the Greek Titanomachy, where the Titans were overthrown and locked up in Tartarus by the gods of Olympus, who became the new rulers. Um, so there's a weird correspondence there, but um but when you read Genesis 6 and you consider, what it reads, that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had offspring by them. These were the heroes of old, the men of renown. And the two Hebrew words there, Gibborim, which is often translated mighty warriors or heroes of old, and then men of renown. It's Anish Hashem, which literally means men of the name. And the connotation of both is fame. Like the term Gibor, it can be translated just as, it's typically translated as mighty warrior, but it doesn't just speak to the intrinsic qualities of the person being described. It speaks to their reputation also, which is why it's often translated as heroes of old. But we say heroes of old, and that connotes virtue. Um, the idea that you get from the book of Genesis is that this was a major influence on the corruption, on why the thoughts of man's heart was only evil all the time, and God was grieved that he made us. The fact that these were our heroes, like we remember, the book of Enoch records them as ravenous monsters who just ran roughshod over the earth, and um ate up all of the food, started eating people, started eating each other. There was a big war between the Nephilim, where a bunch of them killed each other and killed a bunch of humans in the process. They're basically just violent monsters.
They're
But
just Hollywood.
yeah, but men idolized them. They, like, these were figures of admiration that people aspired to be like. Um, Greco-Roman myth remembers them as people like Hercules and Theseus and Perseus, who were demigods. Hercules wasn't terribly admirable himself. I don't remember too much bad that Theseus and Perseus were up to, but but the demigods were typically heroes of Greek stories, in the Bible, demigods were monsters, but who were still revered by humans. And there's a whole bunch of the fact that these beings were admired. It's kind of tied up in the fact that humans were exiled from Eden. Like, we used to have direct access to God, but were banished because of our sin. But then these divine beings descend to earth, and humans are in the presence of divinity again, but it's not the true God. It's they're kind of they're lesser created versions who kind of offer this transcendence to man by association, by fathering these demigods upon us and unleashing them on the world. But it kind of speaks to celebrity culture today. Like, I think we have kind of the same. I think we have the same kind of psychology at work. We just don't necessarily have literal demigods roaming around to be worshipped.
So that does beg the question, were there literal demigods running around, or was just this a story to explain all the corruption that was going on the earth? Is this a story about faithfulness and or is it about actual monsters? Because you just laid out a good, like, if someone was secular and only heard that segment of what you're saying, it would be like, oh yeah, it's just an allegory on how it's bad to worship things that you shouldn't be worshiping, like George Clooney.
Um, well, if that story isn't true, if it's not literally true, if there weren't like literal Nephilim roaming around, then there weren't literal unclean spirits to be driven out by Jesus. Which, like, it.
Did Jesus drive out literal unclean spirits?
Um, I think he seemed to think he was. Uh, I don't think that was written down as metaphorical. I think that, like, by all indications, that was written as history.
Hmm.
Yeah. And, so just real quick, because sometimes I think we have a lot of implied thoughts that we don't necessarily state for somebody who's listening. So if you think about, we've talked about the problem of evil, we talk about the fall a lot, right? The idea that, so we're working off of a combined set of theories and, theses around, like, where do demons come from, right? That's obviously not stated explicitly in the Bible proper, but we extrapolate that from the Book of Enoch and some other things that make a lot of sense. All that being said, if that's not the correct genesis of demons, then that means that these things were created beings. The idea of God creating an entire host of purposely evil beings simply designed to wreak havoc and work against his ends seems really damn odd.
But
It's
also,
I
like,
just want to land this. It's a lot easier to reconcile the creation of demons via events that were directly attributed to the fall than it does to reconcile them as purposely created and unleashed. I just want to make sure I say that, and I say that in those words, because Dre, you're kind of squinty. Do you not, does that not land with you, or do you not like
No,
it?
it completely lands. I just think that, well, what if it's all
What do you mean?
imagery? What, meaning that
If
the
the
demons
entire
come,
book is metaphorical?
the demons come from within you. All the good things come from within you. So really, the fall is us creating the demons. We created
well,
the demons.
Well, we
well,
did
Are
in con
demon are demons literal?
we did
well,
create them in
well. First
concert with
off,
with Watchers.
first off,
Okay.
I want to make it clear that, like, this isn't a series of loose inferences that I'm making, or that Dr. Heiser was making about that. Like, the meaning, the phrase "unclean spirit," like, it had a specific meaning within Second Temple Jewish culture. That meaning is provided in the Book of Enoch. So I think if we're if we're gonna spiritualize is the bad word. If we're gonna treat it as metaphorical, I think that causes more problems than it solves. Like a lot of different things, a lot of dominoes fall with that. Like Jesus clearly, well, the gospel writers clearly believe they were writing history, and I think you'd be hard pressed to argue that they were not faithfully representing the teachings and deeds of Jesus. Jesus believed he was driving out unclean spirits, and he called them that, and it had that particular meaning. But let me address this from a different angle, though. There's this story that's going that's I saw on Facebook a while back. It's been going around for a few years. You guys might have read it. It's I don't know if it's true. I'm going to live my life. It seems true. I'm going to live my life as if it is. But so there was this stalker who had been waiting outside of Robert Pattinson's apartment for weeks while he was off shooting a movie, and he came back, and she ambushed him and poured out her heart, and declared her everlasting love for him, and we're soulmates, and I just know it's true, and you're I'm your biggest fan, and all, stalker stuff. Instead of filing a restraining order and calling the police like a person could be expected to do, he took her to dinner. Um, Took her out to dinner on a date. And he just talked to her the whole time, like a normal human, mostly just kind of bitching about his life, telling her all of his problems, how hard it is being a Hollywood actor, all the hassles he has to go through to get a movie made and get a part and do the traveling, and how rough it is to be Robert Pattinson and all this
How
stuff.
weird ass stalkers just show up unannounced.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he did that, but he basically just like
Sure.
complained about his life,
He
Fun
made himself
fact,
normal.
and she
Robert
lost.
Pattinson shares a birthday with a guy on this panel.
Hmm.
Nice. Is it you?
It is me. It's me.
So she lost all interest because now he's just a normal human being. And I think that illustrates something about celebrity culture, but more importantly, like why it exists. Like we see celebrities as these sort of transcendent beings, and we kind of want to, if we can be associated with them, we can transcend too. Like they live on this different level of life than we have, and we have this deep sense that like our lives aren't significant enough. Like we like just mundane. There's a novel called The Unbearable Lightness of Being that addresses this common human sense that we were made for something higher than the lives that we know. And that's a
Is that
very,
1989 film? 1990?
I think they might have made a movie out of it.
Juliette Binoche. I think
I didn't
Jeremy Irons, I think is it.
I didn't see it. I read
Yeah.
about the concept of it
Okay.
in a book about messiahs of several years ago, and that's how I know about it. But there's this sense. C.S. Lewis described it like the core of the human psyche as being like that of a deposed monarch. Like on some level, we know the heights from which we fell, and we want to recover that, and we look for all these myriad, usually destructive ways to do that. And I've kind of like many years ago when I was in Hawaii, I was in a coffee shop, and um, Adam Sandler walked in, and I'm not like a huge Adam Sandler fan. He's okay. But you know, and I'm not one to like give much thought to celebrities or much care to celebrities, but in that moment, Adam Sandler's walking by. I know I'm never going to meet Adam Sandler again. I don't see celebrities that often. And there was that kind of sense where like have a conversation with Adam Sandler. Well, now for a moment, I'm kind of on that celebrity level myself. Like I'll have transcended the normal day-to-day experience of being me, um, and achieved this higher status. Of course, any celebrity will tell you that's an illusion. They're not really transcendent beings,
Unless
but
you're
we
shared and don't know how to order pizza.
What you do need to do is meet more celebrities, and that will just go away.
I actually went to college with Carrie Underwood before she was Carrie Underwood,
Hot.
as you know her.
Yeah.
And she was just then she got famous.
She's
And
got great
so
legs now, so that a girl.
she's an attractive woman.
But
I like
I
to think that she is somewhere right now telling the story of how she went to college with
what
Brian Irvin.
when
Of
the
Mount
more
Hermeneutics fame.
the more and more celebrities I meet, the more I bump into them, the more I listen to them talk. I'm like, oh wow. And I kind of did this as I just got older, period. Being in rooms with generals, some are impressive, some are, semi-impressive. They got to where they are, but it's not the same aura. It just depends on the guy, right? Or
They're not all General Mattis.
right, or yeah, I do have a presence. Um, I have health issues, so I talk to a lot of doctors now. Like, well, I don't want to listen to a single thing you say ever again, but you're cool. Lawyers, dumb. I've met way too many politicians, and I can't believe you vote for these people. They are literal imbeciles, and it's embarrassing. Um, so it's funny you say that. Uh, even I was standing under a heat lamp. It was a chilly night, and Meryl Streep walks up, and we're just chit-chatting about absolutely nothing. But she was waiting for Steven Spielberg to come by. Listen to me name drop. So, but it was funny because Spielberg's her friend, and they kind of showed up together. And he looked at me like, "Why are you talking to my girl? Like, what are you doing?" Like, so I'm all, "Whoa, my bad, Steve. Nice movie." But in the 80s, loser. No, but seriously, like it was interesting because it's just a man-to-man head nod slash eye contact it was a very normal thing. Um, Terry Crews was completely annoyed as hell to even be in this line, and he was uncool. His wife was dope as hell. And then when I caught Terry later on, he was totally cool because the stress of the show
Had
and
already
whatnot.
gone
But
away.
yeah, and then he was the Terry Crews that we all know and love at that time. So I don't know if it was a put on or if he was annoyed or it's just an interesting thing watching these people interact and some of them you can tell have an inflated uh, thought about themselves. They're a little self-important, and then others are super just down to earth and like, yeah, I'm here. I don't even want to be here. It's what I have to do. I'm contracted to do so. So it's interesting that you like the story about Robert Pattinson doesn't surprise me at all. It's just something that I think that
Yeah.
they're they're
And
just
so
they're just dudes, chicks, man. Like,
and those Hebrew words I mentioned before in
uh,
association with the Nephilim would suggest this was kind of the original celebrity culture. They were the Gibborim, the heroes of old, the men of renown. In the Book of Enoch, the Watcher, who is the leader of the 200 Watchers who descended on Mount Hermon, his name is Shemihaza, which means the face of the name. It's the same kind of connotation that he's the face of renown. Which is what that means. It's the same connotation of fame and fame seeking. um and then the flood happens. They're all wiped out. All the Nephilim are wiped out. The Watchers are locked up in the abyss, and then you have the sons of Noah repopulate the earth, and then you have Nimrod, who is a mighty hunter before the Lord, a mighty Gibborim. He's the founder of the kingdoms of Shinar and Babel and I forget all the rest, but basically he's the implication is he would have been the head of the project to build the Tower of Babel, which was being done so that they are not spread out on the earth and so that they can make a name for themselves. Like they're doing it to recover, they're doing it for fame, but the
As kids would say today, for clout.
yeah, but the suggestion, like the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat.
Nimrod's an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
So the ziggurat would have been, a ziggurat was like a man-made, not like, it was a considered a man-made sacred mountain. Mountains were meeting points between heaven and earth. The Watchers had descended on Mount Hermon. So this was basically an invitation for the Watchers to return and to father more Nephilim, which is why ancient Near Eastern religion is so sex-centric. And that explains why in the book of Genesis, where it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had offspring by them, the implication being this happened at this time to precipitate the flood, and it happened also afterwards, starting with the Tower of Babel and presumably other ancient Near Eastern worship centers, and that's why you have Nephilim after the flood. That's why Og, king of Bashan, had the sacred bed of Marduk, all that stuff. But the bottom line, the motivation for man is to kind of to try to recover that lost sacred space of the Garden of Eden from which we were banished, which resulted in this illicit mingling of divine and human natures for the corruption of the world. But it comes full circle at the day of Pentecost. At the Tower of Babel, God stopped the construction and scattered humanity by confusing our language so that we couldn't communicate. Because if he said if he didn't, nothing would be impossible for us. The day of Pentecost, when everyone spoke in tongues so that they could declare the glories of God in another language, this was a reversal of the curse of Babel, but it was also a restoration of that sacred space within Christians, and now the illicit mingling, the holy mingling of divine and human natures. So it's like the Nephilim are sort of inverted versions of Christians. Like we're not corrupt hybrid beings that turns us into monsters that devour the earth. Now we are redeemed hybrid beings with the divine nature. So we don't need to recover sacred space or look to celebrities to transcend. We have it within us. But what are you laughing at, Matt?
I don't want to get into what made me snicker. It's a meme thing that I don't want to drag the show down with. But it occurs to me that we're talking about all of this chasing celebrity status and whatnot. I've been watching the Percy Jackson series with my son. He's a big Rick Riordan fan, and even not Rick Riordan, but throughout the stories of the Greek demigods, specifically Hercules, but all of them to a certain degree. There's a component of their story which is admittedly them chasing celebrity status. Like
Zero to hero in no time flat, right?
all that
That's the
stuff.
song in Hercules.
Yeah, from the Disney version. Yeah, but
Yeah.
all of that stuff that Hercules did was literally just to get status. It was to be impressive. It was to get, ostensibly to get Zeus's attention.
Right.
So he could get his dad's favor, right?
So it's interesting because he wants to become a full god, right? Mm-hmm. So like I got to do all this hero shit to become a god.
And if I do enough of it, one day I'll be a real boy.
Right, where the Christian doctrine is like, no, there's only one person that can do that for you.
Right.
Just
yeah, it's just interesting. And then we've talked about, Satan and the idea that, the biggest trick Satan ever pulled was, to not show himself, but to just get us to follow our own desires and our own carnal instincts, right? Rather than follow divine direction and guidance, which then, you know, it all kind of comes back full circle. And then you loop in what's going on with culture today. And Joe, you made the comment about the influencers, right? But that's all they do. Influencers literally live their lives by what is going to cause people to think they're cool, because cool gets clicks, clicks get eyes, eyes get revenue, right? Like, um, it's kind of a weird full circle conversation point that, you know, really nothing's changed despite
Yeah,
everything's changed.
we we think we're so much more advanced and sophisticated than ancient peoples, but we just, I mean, we have different means of delivery, but we're still doing all the same things. We're doing it on screens instead of in person, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still.
So what we just talked about for, I don't know, 2 hours,
Yeah, it has been 2 hours,
is
hasn't
it
it?
is it actually essential? So like the question, do Nephilim matter to Christian doctrine? I mean, you say yes, but really, if you were to disagree with everything we just said about Nephilim and our interpretations, or even each one of our interpretations of whatever question we've asked tonight, if you still believe in God's covenant purposes and moral accountability and redemption themes, do you need this?
I would say that if you don't know anything about this, um, but you know about Jesus Christ, you know that he died for your sins, and you understand what that means and why you needed him to die for your sins, and that you're in relationship with God through him, I think you're probably fine. But if you hear about this and this scandalizes you and you have a big problem with it, and you're trying to distance your understanding of Christianity from this, I would say that that probably indicates some significant error in your understanding of what Christianity is. I don't know that it's a fatal error, but I would, but I wouldn't be completely unconcerned about it. I think that
Matt, you have a thought on that?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I think the 100,000, 200,000 foot view, um, the idea of the Nephilim being these, like, you know, somehow genetically superior super soldiers, whatever they were, right? Um, the moral of the story is God's will prevailed, right? Despite the resiliency of the Nephilim, the Rephaim, et cetera, they kept cropping back up. And David, et cetera, David et alia, right, continued to deal with them despite them being stronger, bigger, faster, whatever they were. Um, and and I think there's a literal story to take from that, but also a broader story that, one, you know, chasing clout isn't the answer. And two, these, you know, these seemingly incapable, insurmountable, unbeatable enemies of God are just speed bumps,
Are they
right?
still here?
That's a really interesting question.
I don't think so. And I think the punishment meted out to what the Watchers who sired the previous Nephilim was probably so severe, and that it's a deterrent against. I think people like Aleister Crowley probably tried very hard to uh to bring about some Nephilim, but I think there's not a.
Is that bloodline gone? Is there someone that's part Nephilim? I don't
I
know,
can't.
somebody with maybe like an AB blood type. I'm not making fun of anybody. Like,
Specifically, you're just saying something like
right.
that,
So
yeah.
some kind of weird
I
hybrid
People that
blood
have like
type
a
that's
like a
super
I
rare.
people
People
that
with
can't
red hair,
digest celiac,
red
like
hair,
celiac,
or or green eyes,
they can't
right?
eat gluten.
Yeah, those motherfuckers.
I
So-
I suspect that UAPs are descendants of Nephilim.
You mean like Bigfoot?
UAPs, like
Where does UAP come from, Brian? Why aren't they always here? Where do they go?
under the
Your own
ocean,
theory.
under
They
the
go where?
ocean to the moon, which is hollow. I mean, there are plenty of places on Earth for them to hide. I actually think they're extra dimensional, though. I think that they're,
There, ding, ding, ding. Is
but
Bigfoot extra dimensional?
but back to the whole I don't know, Bigfoot's not I don't think Bigfoot is extra dimensional, but
Well, he's a Wookiee, so
to the Nephilim thing, I think
Some
that
say he's actually beautiful, like a pretty
all
dude,
right, I
like
give
Dolph
up.
Lundgren in Rocky Four.
You win.
Go.
You've silenced me.
Oh, don't be a wuss. What are you saying?
You've worn me
What were you
down.
saying?
I think that no spiritual entity would dare father another Nephilim based on the punishments that are in store for the watchers that came before that did that. But it seems like they content themselves by getting us to pervert our own sexuality. Um, like, and I've talked about this before. You look at John Dee, the Renaissance era wizard who advised Queen Elizabeth and was the mastermind of the British Empire. He was doing angel magic for several years, and it all broke down when the angels kept trying to get him and his squire Edward Kelly to do weird sex stuff and swap wives, and which they did, and then things went predictably badly. And then you had Aleister Crowley, who took up the work of John Dee and went through his 38th years, and he just came up with just new and exciting ways for sexual depravity, and and basically created the sexual revolution by way of his disciple Kenneth Anger to Alfred Kinsey. But it's this,
Or L. Ron Hubbard,
and yeah, L. Ron Hubbard is
who
in
is
the
still
lineage.
super influential to
in
some
Hollywood.
people with some culty stuff going on. Like who knows what goes on in those places, right?
Yeah, but
When we did that Jack Parsons episode with Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard and their
yeah,
connections, which is bonkers.
but there's a direct ideological lineage from the sexual revolution back to Alfred Kinsey, who is the father of the sexual revolution, through Aleister Crowley back to Genesis 6. And I think that there is a spiritual lineage. I think that Crowley, by his works and his followers' works, I think he unleashed something upon the world that is leading to all of this sexual and moral confusion today. Which I think is a component of, Romans 1 style, people just not considering the knowledge of God worthwhile to retain. So he gives us over to our sinful, depraved, our depraved inclinations. But it's these are all different facets of kind of the same war that goes back to Genesis 6. So, but no, I don't think they're a Nephilim anymore, unless they're UAPs.
That was the opposite of a lightning round question,
Yeah.
or an
Which is
answer
fine.
rather.
You know, I mean, we talked about the significance of Genesis 6. We talked Genesis 6 for 2 hours.
We did.
And we could go on, which
We
is
could,
incredible.
but we shouldn't.
We should not. So yeah. Matt, you have final thoughts?
No, I mean, like you said, we could keep swinging this into another angle. It's a good thing the three of us aren't in person and have a bottle of whiskey in front of us, because we would go on for another 3-4 hours.
I do want to add one more thing. It was kind of the completion of my thought when you asked, like, does this, like, can you get by without this? Does
Yeah.
somebody, um,
I kind of felt like that was a pivotal question. That was
yeah. If you don't know anything about it, I think you're okay. If you do know about it but reject it, you're probably in error. But if you know about it and accept it, it deepens your understanding of the rest of it. Like it only
Yeah.
it. I don't think it's healthy to be too overly preoccupied with Nephilim.
Right.
Um,
Wait, what?
but but
Define preoccupied. I'm gonna need you to quantify and qualify that statement.
but understanding what
It
that
depends on what you mean by preoccupied.
understanding what that means within the context of the overall biblical narrative, it only strengthens things. And you kind of like when you understand the nature of the war as it plays out in the book of Genesis, you kind of see how it's playing out today. Like I feel like I feel like I understand the underlying issues better than I did before I knew about all this, especially with the transgender stuff and the like there is a war afoot by dark forces to dehumanize us, and they take great delight in mutilating God's image within us and getting us to mutilate his image within ourselves. So
So if you're a young man or a woman and you
And you have to pick, by
never
the way, you can't be both.
you never you never studied the Bible, you didn't grow up in a house that was religious at all, somebody introduces you to this type of thing, and then they watch, this episode. Is this a healthy place for them to start?
um
Like, is there other fundamentals that they should grasp before they start grasping at giants and angel sex?
I
Well,
think if it piques their interest, I mean, I think if it shows them that there's a like I think the number one value of this is that it shows people that the Bible isn't the boring book of
Sure.
moral
Uh,
fables that you think it is. There's
100%, I agree.
actually it's so weird that it has to be true. Um, like it's not the kind of stuff that people would make up. I don't think. Um, it's got that kind of real life grittiness to it, and when you so yeah, I don't like if somebody doesn't know about the Bible and they hear about Nephilim and they dive in and they're all about Nephilim and they stop there. Well, you know, you had a fun hobby and that's it. But if
Well,
it's
it's hard to go anywhere else because that's way more exciting than everything else.
well,
Like,
is
so I
it
guess my
though?
question is it this isn't an entry level discussion, I think.
I think it is this way. I think you've got to understand the framing of the storyboard, right? Like this is a storyboard that starts with the creation, right? And then, like, just to hyper simplify this, you've got creation, you've got Eden, you have the fall, you have Nephilim, you have a whole bunch of stuff betwixt and between that, a lot of grief and pain and fighting and blood and bloodshed, and then you've got the Tower of Babel, and then you've got a period of watcher rule on Earth,
We're not even halfway through Genesis yet.
right? And then the resolution of that is the birth of Jesus Christ. Like I think that's kind of like a very high level, like, speed dating understanding of what happened in the Bible. Um, because without all of that, Jesus's appearance and then his crucifixion and resurrection doesn't really have a lot of, it's kind of hard to understand why. Like there had to be all of that crazy shit that I just talked about to require and justify the incarnation of God in a man.
So where would you recommend this you start with a brand new atheist who wants to be a
Well, I
Christian?
mean, I don't know. I don't know about like where they should. I mean, if somebody came
Well,
upon this, like if this was their first, like let's say an atheist heard our show for the first time and it was this episode, and they were like, "What?" Right? Like, then ideally you would back up and you would understand how this came to pass, and then understand why this isn't the future. Right? Again, this is halftime. The
Right.
Nephilim
And,
is
and by the way, this is not any kind of agenda that I'm coming
right,
up with. This
right?
is this is just I'm picking brains like,
Sure.
hey,
Yeah, it, I wouldn't deliberately introduce somebody to Christianity by bringing up Nephilim. I think
Fair.
it's more the other way around. I think it's more like this is an interesting little hook that you can use to bring people in. Like it is interesting.
yeah, but
Um,
have you heard about giants? I know you're not interested in the church, but this is the church of the Nephilim, so you gotta come in here because this is gonna be fun. It's a wild
um,
ride.
but more importantly though, like if to answer your question about an atheist who is wants to be a Christian,
Or
I don't,
curious, right?
or
Or
who's
some and
I would
atheist is kind of a bad term. Just somebody who's like, I don't know what the hell
a
you're talking
seeker,
about. What is
a seeker.
seeker?
I would start with apologetics. I would explain why Christianity is in fact true and how they can know that it's true. And then I would think that would be the most interesting thing about it. And in fact, when I've had this conversation with atheists or non-believers, um, I've told you guys my favorite thing that ever happens. Like I'll be sitting in a bar or a coffee shop or somewhere with other Christians talking about Christian
Just
stuff.
reading Hebrews and someone stops you. What are you reading?
Yeah. Um, and so uh, somebody overhears and they say, they say something to mock or belittle Christianity, to which I always respond, as a Christian, I am absolutely certain that I have far better reasons for believing what I do than you do for whatever you believe that makes you mock it. And then they're always like, "Oh, well, okay, this should be good." Um, and it's always best if they're
He's like,
super obnoxious and ostentatious, and if there's a crowd that overhears it, so then they have to stay in the conversation and they can't extricate themselves without losing face. Normally, when that happens, the most common response I get is they are astonished to hear that there's actually so much rational grounding for Christianity. There's far more to it than they ever thought. They are at first amazed, and then it's usually followed by a bit of anger that they just spent 20, 30 years of their life going to church and they never heard any of this stuff before. They were just taught to suspend disbelief and call that faith. Um, but so yeah, that's that's not always the response, but that is a common response. So apologetics is the best place to start. Um, but if you're but Nephilim is always good too if they're into that kind of thing. So
I always start with Aleister Crowley. That's where I start.
Well, that's not a bad get angle, right? Is to actually draw that connection back. Brian brought it up earlier, but I think that gets I feel like there's not a lot. I've never heard a pastor explain that in a church service, right? And I would love to. I may have to whisper into my pastor's ear and see if I can't push that into our agenda. But the
Can I
idea
give
that
a guest sermon?
that ain't gonna happen. Not
They'll be like, whoa.
I'd be like, hey, can I do a? He's like, let me see what you're gonna preach about. No,
Get this heretic out of our building
well, it's
right
not
now.
heresy. It's probably
Right,
gonna be too too touchy,
right.
right? But I mean, to basically say, the thesis statement would be like, gender theory is an abomination before God. I'm going to show you how I can trace this all the way back to Genesis, right? And then just 12 steps, right? It would even be hard to do. And you run that back and go, now what? Like
it's
mic drop and just walk off the stage. Like, but I've never heard anybody say that in pop culture or, in mainstream discussions.
and I think it's pretty scandalous that
I think it's
you
because we're the only three in the world that know.
well, I don't expect Pat, your garden variety Christian pastor, to know that much about Aleister Crowley, but the fact that
I bet Wes Huff doesn't. Wes Huff, are you watching the show? I challenge you.
it, it,
Tell me
it
what you know about Aleister Crowley.
it angers me that we don't we don't hear about the culture war, and I hear so many Christians, so many people leading Bible studies or churches who proudly declare themselves above the culture war.
I think you're right, Brian, and I don't want to say but. Let's make this a follow-on episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe. I don't know that I have much more to say about it.
You do.
Besides that.
I know you do.
I don't have much more to say. Give me 3 minutes and I'll be done.
Yeah, no.
1 hour later.
You're done. So I think we should wrap it right there.
Yeah, I think we solved Nephilim.
About the giants.
We solved them.
But tell John, your brother, that we solved the Nephilim.
He'll be happy to know that.
He loves that.
He does.
So if there's nothing else, I'm just gonna say, hey, listen up. Stay blessed. Stay curious. Stay enlightened. And stay away from Enochian angel magic.
And keep your hair covered.
Because of the angels. And with that, good night. We'll see you next week. God bless.